friends. Welcome to a super exciting episode of Studio Dialogues. Today I'm in conversation with an amazing watercolorist, Andy Evansen. Andy began painting watercolors in the mid-1990s as a change of pace from his career as a medical illustrator, but his work soon got recognition internationally, and he's become a most sought-after workshop instructor. He's also received many awards for his work and has been a part of many plein conventions and events. So without much further delay, let's get into conversation with Andy. So hi, Andy. So lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you too.
Yeah, great. So, I'd always start talking about my guest by asking about their background, and how they got into art and since when they have been in this field. So maybe you could just talk a little about yourself and your art.
Sure. Yeah, I went to school for illustration work. I've always liked to draw. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been interested in art and drawing, and it was definitely something that I felt that I was better at than a lot of people, and realized that maybe if I have this gift, I should do something with it. It's not the most lucrative career financially to go into art. There are definitely better options if you're looking to make a lot of money. But it's just something that's always been in me, and so I'm really happy I made that choice. But when I was going to school, instead of kind of focusing on fine art, I decided to focus on illustration work. And I got really lucky because I actually wasn't really aware of the medical illustration aspect of the commercial illustration field. And when I was looking for work, I got hired at a studio in Minneapolis here in Minnesota. That kind of specialized in medical illustration. And she hired me just kind of based on a lot of my figurative work that I'd done in school and my portfolio. And so I kind of learned on the job there for a handful of years, and then decided to go freelance and kind of supplemented my education. I went back to school and took there was a nursing program at a local college, and I took some anatomy courses and stuff. But that ended up being, like I was saying, it's tough to make a living as an artist, but that was a really lucrative career. I did it for like 25 years, medical illustration, and it really didn't matter, what the economy was like, the recessions and everything. The medical field still just kind of kept going, and I was always busy. And so that was good. I had good, consistent work. Excuse me. But eventually, when I was in school, I was learning, all the traditional illustration techniques, pencil and airbrush and all that kind of stuff. And, this is how old I am. This is when finally Photoshop first became popular. And so I had to teach myself, Photoshop in addition to everything else. Just started creating the illustrations on the computer because it's such a technical field. I think a lot of people were looking for those kinds of illustrations. And it did help. I mean, eventually when it made things a lot easier, the illustration projects, but I just kind of missed, painting and drawing and stuff. So I always liked watercolor. I've always kind of been drawn to it. And I worked with watercolor a lot in school, in the illustration classes, acrylic and watercolor. Wasn't really a lot of oil painting and stuff, those studios. It was a lot more drawing and watercolor. So I had all the supplies and a little bit of a comfort level for it, and never thought it would become a career. I just decided I wanted to start painting and watercolor, for fun. And but it was good. It was a good way to kind of, ease into the shallow end of the pool instead of just saying, I'm going to be an artist, and diving in. I had a career. I was making money. I wasn't trying to, force feed my paintings on galleries and collectors and stuff until I was able to, get a little bit better. So it took a few years, for me to get a comfort level with it. And but finally that got to the point where I'm like, I'm going to start entering some local shows and stuff and see what happens. And I joined the Minnesota Watercolor Society and met some other artists and that kind of stuff. And then once, I started winning a couple awards from them, and then they ask you to do demonstrations at their meetings for the groups and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of that common career path, I think, that a lot of watercolor artists go through.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't, it wasn't rushed. I had a chance to really kind of develop my painting, which was, I'm very happy about.
Hmm. Yeah, because the stress of having to make your living from uh, watercolor painting or whatever medium one uses is kind of high because it's tough to make really money in the beginning, especially until your work is really recognized and you have students or you have paintings being sold or things like that. So I think it's
Yeah.
great to have that career in something and then be painting on the side and then maybe getting to a
Yeah.
point where you can actually make it your first, your actual career.
Yep, it is. And I teach a lot. I love to teach. It's a big part of what I do. But it's also kind of a financial necessity, with
Yeah.
watercolor, typically the prices that people purchase watercolors at is lower than oil. Oil painting much lower. So even if I was selling a lot of paintings, it would still be, tough
Yeah.
to make a real living at it. But so yeah, that's teaching the workshops is a great way to supplement my income.
Mm, yeah. But it's interesting that you didn't end up painting figures and portraits or, even like figurative and you actually went into landscapes. Was it like a move away from what you actually do all the time just to try
Yeah,
something different?
I think so. I mean, I've always loved being outside. I grew up in Wisconsin, with a farm, literally farm and fields and cows across the street from us. That I didn't live on a farm, but they were right across the street. One of my best childhood friends was a year older than me, a boy that lived on the farm, and my brothers and I and all the other neighbors, we were playing in the fields and the woods and camping and just all that stuff. Our fishing out in there, there's a little stream back there and stuff. So it was kind of an idyllic way to grow up, being out there. And never really, I mean, I love going to the big cities. I love New York and stuff to visit, but I couldn't live there. It's just too much,
Oh,
I love to come back home and just kind of breathe, and
nice.
see the big skies and the farms and stuff. So, yeah, the landscape has always been, a big part of of me, growing up and being outside. And it just didn't, I don't know. There's something about portrait painting that never really appealed to me that much, especially when it comes time to, the style of painting that I want to do. I want to loosen up a little bit. And, the medical illustration was all about accuracy, and portrait painting is a lot about, I mean, even the loose portraits, you got to make sure that, proportions are right and all that kind of stuff. And, when you're outside, I have to be a little bit accurate if there's buildings, and that kind of thing. But you have a lot more freedom with skies and trees and
Yes,
fields and
yes,
stuff. You don't have to worry about
exactly.
being quite
Yeah,
so accurate. So,
your imagination can play a part in it and,
mhm.
you can add things
Yeah,
in. It's quite
exactly.
interesting.
What
Oh,
better
that's
way to
great.
spend a nice day than, outside. So, yep.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you, that was my next question, that, have places you have lived in or visited, have they influenced the kind of work you do, which is exactly what you're saying, that having grown up, in the countryside, that's what
Hmm.
appeals to you, right? But,
Yeah.
having said that, so is that why your work is like maybe inspired by the English watercolorists? Because it's like, it's not exactly the same, but maybe inspired by them? Is that
I
is
think
that
so. Yeah. I mean, most of the more the famous ones, they weren't in London. They weren't in the big
yeah,
city. They were kind of in smaller areas, and they were out, painting the pristine English landscape a lot, sheep farms and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. So, yeah, it really spoke to me, not only the subject matter, but the way that they painted it. It was just so decisive and clean and simplified. That's always appealed to me, that aspect of watercolor, and the fact that you can, get a painting done rather quickly in watercolor that way instead of just kind of, laboring over it for days on end. I tend to get excited about, this subject. And I don't know what's going to excite me at that time. I mean, a lot of my paintings are like, people comment on that. Why'd you paint that? But there was something about the light was hitting it, or, whatever in that moment. And I'm excited about it and I paint it and then I move on. And, a week from now, that might not capture my imagination in the same way. So yeah, I like that aspect of watercolor, but definitely the English watercolor artists that I admire. Yeah, they inspired me quite a bit and just kind of gave me something to focus on. That's how I want to paint, which is important, when you're starting out, because you can, trying to choose a style. I mean, a lot of it just kind of happens organically as you paint. You can't fake it. Um, we're all influenced by other people, but eventually you have to kind of become your own artist, and that just happens painting and painting and painting. So yeah, I wasn't trying to copy their work or anything, but I knew kind of, I saw how they painted and I just wanted to take that style and kind of translate it to
Yeah.
my world, my landscape.
Yeah. I mean, anyways, techniques have kind of changed over time because the way those guys painted, the kind of pigments they had compared to what we have today, with all these
Oh,
brands. I mean,
right.
it's also, I mean, it's so different anyways.
It
You're not
is.
doing the same
But
way.
yeah, but that being said, I mean, we have so many choices, like you're saying, with brands and colors and stuff, but I still have a very limited palette. And maybe that's part of it too, because I don't have, I have like a handful of blues, a handful of like warm yellows and earth cut tones and a few reds. And that's about it, in my palette. So I like to mix my greens. I like to mix all my secondary, tertiary colors and not get too crazy with the color. I like the natural colors of the landscape. So yeah, I tend not to load my palette up with too many colors.
I think probably that's one of the reasons why your work looks fresh because, I mean, what strikes most about your work is, the clean compositions and there's always a great focal points and it all looks very fresh. The countryside has to be fresh, right? That's the appeal.
Yeah.
That's how your paintings are to me. I mean, at least to me, I'm sure for most people. So I think
Thank
that
you.
might be one of the factors where you keep your palette very carefully limited and
Yeah, I think
enough
so.
colors.
And I tell my students that too. When I'm using the same blues that I put into the sky, I'm using those same blues to mix the greens for my trees and the fields and stuff. And so that it just kind of adds a harmony to your painting instead of using this blue in the sky and then looking for a green on your palette to paint the trees and it's a completely different color. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it, a limited palette and mixing colors together.
So you like to mix your greens probably, right? With
Oh
the
yeah.
basic
Yeah,
tribe.
I used to have, I had a handful of green. I've had Viridian on my palette, and I know that's a really popular color with even a lot of the English watercolor artists. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
It's too strong. It's so strong. And I
It's
don't
too
know.
strong. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a phthalo kind of a color. So I took that off my palette. I had Hooker's green for a while and sap green was a big one that I used for a long time. When I look back on my earlier paintings, I'm like, oh boy, that's when I was using sap green. It was so strong, just a hideous, green. But I ended up after a while starting to realize how strong it was, and I found myself I was always, adding burnt sienna to it or adding blue to it to cool it down. And eventually, I'm like, why do I even have this green if I have to keep adding stuff to it to change it? So yeah.
Yeah, I think the only green I like is olive green. Sometimes it's got that little bit of a muted down green, which goes well with
Hmm.
a lot of colors. But yeah,
Yep. Yeah,
maybe
that's
one
the
day I
that's the
can do
best.
without it
I
with enough experience.
wanted to ask you, but that's kind of it's a peculiar thing. I know this is an interview of me, but I notice, regionally how artists, their styles develop and things. And you can look at the British watercolor artists and they kind of have a style. And you look at Iranian watercolor artists and they kind of have this kind of a style. Definitely a lot of the United States people, more technique driven, but the Indian watercolorists, the colors that they use is this, you can almost tell it's an Indian watercolor just by the palette. I mean, it's just this explosion of color, and I've never been there, but
Yeah,
I'm assuming that, a lot of it is because of what the clothing that people are wearing and the colors of this on the streets and everything. So,
yeah. No, of course. I mean, where you live and how you grew up, like you said, even the Indian countryside has much more color because
Yeah,
people paint their houses different colors. It's
right.
very cool to kind of drive through a small town or a village, and there'll be houses painted pink and blue and yellow sometimes,
I
and
love that. I
people
love
love
that. Yeah,
color.
beige is a real popular color here.
Yeah. Exactly. The thing
Everything
that
is some
excites me
kind of
most
a,
about the West is when you're walking down the street and you see a lot of grays and blacks and
uh,
beiges. And in
yeah,
India, you won't, you won't see much of that. You'll only see
no.
color. Yeah.
Our house is blue. I rebuilt it.
No, but that's interesting because you mentioned something about cultures affecting style. But if you kind of generalize how an artist will arrive at a style, for you, you said that because you grew up seeing the countryside, so you kind of started painting like that. But often, for people who are in intermediate stage or when they're developing their style, it becomes a matter of conscious working towards it sometimes. But I think,
Mhm.
if you have the luxury of kind of just painting and discovering things and enjoying that, it's fine. But sometimes people just want to arrive at something and, make it a certain style. So do you have any tips on that, or do you have any advice for people that they should do
Yeah,
or they should not do?
yeah, I know what you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
truthfully, that will only take you so far, you know.
Okay.
At some point, people are going to look at your work and say, yeah, that's good, but it's kind of like that person, but not as good as that person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we all, like I said, we all learn, we all have our idols. We take workshops, I took from Joseph Zbukevich, Barrow Castagnier and Skip
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence, when I was first starting to paint, I was trying to loosen up, and all this stuff. So I sought out, loose watercolor painters. But I think I can truthfully say I didn't want to paint, just like
Yeah.
them. I was kind of looking to see how they did it, pick up some ideas and that. But it's unfortunate, I think, that a lot of times you can tell when people get out of a workshop and you start seeing their work, for a while, it looks like, that,
Yeah.
like they were
That
in that
person.
person's
Yes.
workshop for a while. And that's kind of a dangerous place to be, I
But it's
think.
not sustainable, Andy. I mean, I don't think it's sustainable in the long run because you
It's
can't even
not.
think like that person. So beyond a
Yeah.
point, you're not going to be catching up. So,
Yeah, you've got to be yourself. And that's what I was saying, by the subject matter is a big part of it,
yeah.
painting what's around you. It's kind of fun. I even see a lot of like Chinese watercolor artists, Joseph Zbukevich is really popular in China, and they're painting and they're painting like these scenes like they're in Australia, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you paint China? Why are you doing that? So again, the temptation, because you see the successes of other people and you want to say, wow, that's the people love that style, I'm going to paint like that. But you're exactly right, that's not sustainable. You've got to paint from what's inside, paint within. And that's when your work is really going to become successful. And I think that's what I found as well. I kind of, we all do that to some extent when we start out. You're painting, and when you're trying to make a living, you're kind of choosing subjects like, is this something people will buy? I'm trying to
Yeah.
almost like postcard kind of images, because you're trying to sell your paintings. And I don't know. I think most of my success happened when I decided I'm not doing that. I'm painting for me. I'm gonna, and the rest of it be damned. I'm just gonna. If people buy it, they buy it. If they don't, they don't. And I found that more people were starting to buy my work and really enjoy my work when I started,
Yeah.
painting what I
Yeah.
wanted to
Painting
see.
what you want it for yourself, not for
Yeah.
anybody else. Yeah.
Yep.
So that rarely works. Then it becomes work like a million other people, paint. Doesn't
Yeah. Well, like I
doesn't
said, what's the
discern
point?
between, yeah, doesn't make it
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. But is it something you kind of tell your students when you're teaching? And I think, I mean, you have like a lot of students, who might be just kind of copying your style and, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because they're learning from you. But how do you get them to just learn the techniques from you and not kind of, or kind of get into their own style or uh,
Yeah, and again,
develop
I
different
think
things?
what I'm teaching is, I mean, you see it when I post things on Instagram and stuff, the value studies and everything, and it works. But again, there's a big difference between what I'm painting when I'm teaching and when I'm in the studio or outside and I'm focused. There's just a different feeling to it. I'm trying to, simplify the process as much as I can, because most people, when they take workshops, they want to loosen up a little bit. And it's not just painting fast. You've got it with watercolor in particular. You need to have a plan. So the value study thing that I teach is just to kind of help people start seeing bigger shapes and, not worrying too much about the details, and then they can start loosening up a little bit. And yeah, there are a handful of students who kind of took that and really, kind of copy that to some extent, and, posting their work. It's like, wow, they paint a lot like me. That's impressive. But, again, that's how sustainable is that, so, and even the ones that do, I think eventually I see some of their work and they're painting subjects that mean something to them, or they're using a different color palette or whatever. And, yeah, I don't, it is. It's to be expected if you teach as much as I do, with a technique like that people are gonna, follow that path. That's the whole point of it. But again, there's a lot more that goes into it than just one step, two step,
Yeah.
three step. Here's a painting. So
eventually they will start painting differently, because they will be looking for other subject matters, and whatever they're painting in front of them, it tends to kind of move away from a certain style which they've copied before. But I mean, of course, we understand that to learn, you have to kind of, if you're showing a demo, they have to kind of copy that, yes, to some extent.
Right.
But it's important as a student to kind of take away the techniques and the thought process, rather than, the exact colors. How people will ask you, what are you mixing?
Yeah.
Which blue is this? And yeah, it happens. I mean, we all have done that. I've done that. So.
I've never understood that, why they want to know every step of the way what colored mixtures I'm making. It's just, such a strange question, but it's so common. Yeah.
It's very common, yes. Yeah. Anyhow, so one very different question. So, do you think art is important to all of us, to people in the world? Does it make a change in any way? Like, why art? Why would you think it's really important in life? Or is it like it's not really related to what when you work, you don't think of it that way?
Well, to some extent, I guess. I mean, I'm trying to show people the beauty of, the everyday, and try and get people to appreciate a little bit more of what's, right around us. It's a term here in the United States, flyover country, and it just kind of means like the Midwest, the middle part of the United States. People are kind of fly from coast to coast and don't even bother, coming to this area, because it is still very rural and there's a lot of farmland and stuff. So, but again, I've spent my whole life here and to this point, and there's a lot of beautiful, scenes that I want to show people in this area. It doesn't all have to be dramatic, and the Rocky Mountains and the oceans, shores and stuff. So, yeah, that's a big part of, just what I try to think about when I'm an artist, why it's important. But, when you see, I don't make a lot of social statements in my art or anything, I guess, because I'm a landscape painter. But, it's definitely a way for artists to, express their frustrations of what's happening in the world. There's things, obviously, every country has its problems, some more than others, sadly. But, yeah, and then art is a way of, like I said, just kind of, venting. Instead of just opening your window and screaming, you can put something out on canvas or sculpt or whatever you want to do, or write a song or a poem about it, to, get your feelings out there. So that it's very therapeutic in that regard as well. And then just, not as in terms of an artist, but a viewer, I can't think of, when you're all stressed out or whatever, what better way to kind of reground yourself than to go to a museum and walk around and see all this beautiful, paintings and sculptures, and, just kind of the rest of the world goes away for a few hours while you're in there, and you can just appreciate that. And I think that's a really, really important aspect of life, to be able to go and see some beauty and see some art every once in a while. And you have to make a conscious effort to do that sometimes if you don't live right around someplace like that. But we have usually there's museums around that you can go see, or there's a lot more little local art shows and co-ops and things that pop up. And so, yeah, it's a very important part of life.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you said about also maybe painting what's around you and then taking the mundane things that you take for granted and making them pretty, right? Because I think it's watercolor can turn a simple barn into something really magical, which, you know, often, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
must have heard that your painting is nicer, it's more beautiful than the actual scene, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
the luxury we artists have of imagining and making something look much better than, more dramatic or more, exciting than what it actually is.
Yeah,
So that's also
exactly.
one thing which is very interesting, I think, what you said, that you want to kind of bring simple things in life to people in a beautiful way, right?
Yeah, but then again, that's, I was just talking about going to museums and stuff and seeing these great works of art.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can go for a walk, and once you start, noticing these things a little bit more, and I hope that that's maybe something that I'll leave behind in this world when I'm gone, is that people, kind of see my appreciation for, kind of the everyday things, and the beauty that's in there. I really enjoy painting that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think art which is positive is like so much more valuable because there's enough negativity around anyways in the world. And it's something that maybe can bring happiness to people, right? In some way or the other.
Yeah, bring a smile to people's faces. I love that when people comment on, Instagram or something, when they say, I just came across, I just got up, and had my coffee and I saw this painting, and wow, that's such a nice compliment. You touch someone halfway across the world sometimes, in a
Yeah.
positive way. So yeah, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, and so one more thing, so Andy, about your work, I think composition and, like I said, you know, just like getting away from the clutter of what you see in a scene, and maybe grabbing just like a few important things that you want to hero in your painting. That's something I love about your work because it's just like, I mean, it's magical, and it sounds easy, but it's not, as you and I know that it's not easy to do that, right? That's the
No.
struggle most of us face until we really maybe get into that zone. So any
Mhm.
tips on that? I'm sure the viewers would die to hear this, if you have some tips on that. Maybe people who don't
uh,
really haven't studied before, learned from you.
Yeah. Well, I still have this sitting on my table here. I just taught a workshop as an example of, taking the
Wow.
complicated scene, just a street
Yeah.
scene, but these are the kind of lessons I do in my workshops,
Yeah.
But finding that one big connected shape initially is a great way to break away from, all the details. Because that's, there's always something about that scene that you chose, why am I painting this? And sometimes it can be a small little portion, a little activity in a scene, but sometimes it's the atmosphere, the whole mood of the light or the fog or the snow or whatever. So it doesn't have to be about one small thing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But make sure all your decisions that you make about that painting reinforce that, why am I painting? Keep asking yourself, why did I choose to paint this scene?
Mhm.
Because it's real easy to start once you get into the painting and you're over here, and that because I'm painting this aspect of or this portion of the painting, now that's the most important thing, and we're working on it and working on it. It's like, why are you even bothering with that? You're just taking attention away from this. So I think that's a big thing. That's it constantly, have that in the back of your mind. Everything should support that initial, what excited you about it, either that little group of figures or that bicyclist coming through or the sunlight breaking through the clouds, or maybe it's the whole softness, like I said, of a
Yeah,
day with snow flurries or something. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So the moment we start kind of going away from that, then is our
Then walk
struggle.
away.
Time to
Put the
tear it
brush
up.
down. Yeah, put the brush down and walk away.
No,
No,
but
and
what
it's
a what
amazing.
a
It
word.
happens. It's
But
amazing how quickly that happens. Like I said, because we get this tunnel vision and we think it's, all the deep when it comes time to putting those those dark details on, on your value study in particular,
Yeah.
you start, putting too much detail on. There was obviously in that scene, I've simplified a great deal, the windows and the details on the cars. I'm just painting the largest, simplest shapes that I see so
Mm.
that it all kind of reinforces, the light, that street scene. I wanted the lady's shirt was white. I didn't need a bunch of white spaces everywhere else to compete with
Right.
that. So
Yeah.
that's the only little area, her walking out of her garden gate there in England.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's enough definition in there, so you show that to somebody and they know what it is, maybe even where it is. It looks a little bit English, but and
Mm.
truthfully, there's so little detail in there.
But this is
You know,
fabulous study because all the things that one needs to kind of look at are in the study, because it's like the connecting shapes, the eye movement, just two focal points, and
Yep.
moving from one to the other. I mean, it's perfect. So I mean, yeah. So students, lucky students though, they get to
Yeah,
kind of learn this
it
every
is.
day and every time.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's good. And I have a lot of students who take multiple workshops from me
Yeah.
just because it's a lot more difficult than it looks and that you
Yeah.
think, because that's not the way our brains work. We kind of focus on little things and details. It's tough to see the big
Yeah.
shapes.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I guess that's where the experience comes in, and I think working at it again and again. I mean, the more work you do, I think the more you see things clearly, right? Or rather,
Yeah.
not so clearly. Maybe you blur it
hmm
out, which is required.
Yeah, and that's actually a big benefit of um, how much teaching that I do because um, if I'm teaching a workshop like every month, basically, if not more,
Yeah.
sometimes. And it's, by constantly going back to that, I'm explaining it to my students, but it's being reinforced to me all the time. All these lessons that I do and going back to the basics and simplifying. If I wasn't teaching as much as I was, it's real easy to just kind of keep
Mm-hmm.
going forward and it's without it's so important even now after all this time to go back and revisit the basics once in a while because you think it's all just getting more and more complicated and complex all the time, but yeah, having these little value studies constantly reinforced in my mind because I'm teaching them is a really good thing for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. But one question on the students, from the students' perspective, a lot of watercolor beginners, they get frustrated very easily, right? It's natural because it's a tough medium to capture. And
hmm
how do you as a teacher keep them motivated and like work enough to get somewhere? It's a very tough one for a teacher. I mean, I have experienced that myself. So I mean, that would be lovely to know how you as a, because you're a very, well-known teacher. I mean, people really love your workshops. So,
Yeah, I think, thanks for that. I think one of the big things in my workshops, and I hear it from the students a lot of times, is because I do start with a lot of the basics. It's not just diving in and doing paintings. I think when that's the focus, coming out of things with something that you're happy with, that's what leads to a lot of the frustration. And it's not all about that. I don't know, but musicians don't just think that they can go up and perform, concerts all the time. You've got to practice, the basics and rehearse and, do revisit all those things like I was talking about before as a teacher. So by constantly kind of reinforcing smaller exercises, just kind of getting your brushes wet and let's just, I do this a lot before we dive in. I'm like, let's just practice this car, because I know that's going to be a problem for you. So I give them a couple of tips and we'll paint that. And then you go on to the painting and you've done it, before and you're more comfortable with it. But if I had just given them this whole street scene and said, okay, draw the buildings and these people and these cars and, everything and put it all together, it's too much, so you've got to, I keep reinforcing the fact to go back to the basics a lot, just practice. If the only time you get your brushes wet and paint is when you're doing a painting, your
mm,
learning curve is going to stay like this. You're going to spin your wheels for a long time. But if you go back and practice little things once in a while, almost on a daily basis when you don't have time to do a whole painting, then like I said, if you just sit for a day, not even a day, but for 20 minutes or a half an hour and just paint little figures, that's a long time. If you just sat and watch for 20 minutes and watch the second hand tick by, that's a long time. But think of how many little figures you could
Figures,
paint
yeah.
in 20 minutes, and then don't worry about putting them into a painting. Get comfortable doing that. So I think that's a big part of what keeps the students from being frustrated is, don't expect to have paintings all the time.
Yeah.
And I tell them too, you're going to see, because whenever I demonstrate in class, I'm never typically, unless I'm some of the basic lessons, I use a lot of the same references for, but when I'm doing demonstrations and when I'm painting with the students, I'm always bringing new material, things I haven't painted before. So they're going to see me make mistakes too. I'm far from perfect. That's ridiculous to think that I don't paint bad paintings or make mistakes. It happens all the time. And so I think that's a big part of it too. They need to realize that, yeah, there's not some unattainable,
Yeah.
perfection that you're going to get to. Allow yourself to paint some bad paintings and make mistakes and not worry about it.
Yeah, that's a great learning to see, the person you're idolizing or you're learning from make those mistakes, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
also very good to see the thought process of the teacher, through those mistakes. That, oh,
Yeah.
I think if I had done this way, it'll be a better composition or, be more
Yep.
better.
Yep, exactly. And that's happened many times in the workshops, like I said, because so they're seeing me actually work through things, and a lot that happens. A lot of times I put something and I'm like, yeah, I wish I hadn't done that. But, next time if I repaint it, I'll change that. That's how we learn. It's a cliche, but you learn more from your mistakes than your successes. If I do a really good painting and, that I'm really proud of, sometimes it's like, wow, I don't know how that happened, but as soon as I screw something up, it's like, I shouldn't have gone back in that cloud with that darker color or something, you learn instantly, what you did
Yeah.
wrong. So
Yeah, I mean, there's no going back in most of the cases. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
watercolor, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's fun. That's the beauty of it, I guess.
It is.
And yeah, so Andy, how do you reinvent yourself? How do you challenge yourself? Maybe even because you're doing what you do very well. So are there times when you feel that you want to just break out of that and do something more challenging or reinvent yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing's easy. I think I'm challenging myself all the time, even though I'm not, I don't change my style that much. I know how I want to paint. The subject matter, because of all the traveling I do, and now that the pandemic is waning, I'm doing more international travel again. So anytime you fly and get plopped down in a new country with new, atmosphere and new buildings and whatever, that's a big challenge,
That's
to
already
paint these.
challenging. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you're
teaching is
just
very
not familiar.
challenging because to get your thought process across to someone who's not there, not at the same thought level, it's very challenging already, actually. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can understand that.
teaching is a big challenge. It's exhausting sometimes. People don't understand. So I think how much goes into it, and especially if you've got a big class, because you've got to, you go to this student, you've got to see their work, kind of process it, what they're doing wrong, figure out how to explain it to them, give them advice on what to fix, and then go over there, this student, look at their work, process it, see what they're doing
Yeah,
wrong, trying to figure out how to explain it to them, go to that student. It's really tiring,
oh, it is.
teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
challenge.
And it's physically demanding too. I mean, painting is not, a piece of cake in that sense.
Right.
It's physically
Yeah. Oh,
demanding. Yeah.
oh yeah. I'm wiped. I go back at night and, and just pour a glass of wine and fall asleep or so. Yeah, it's not easy at all. But as far as, even because I paint a landscape where I live here, in fact, today is going to be like 65 degrees, I think, and we had rain. And tomorrow it's going to be in the 30s Fahrenheit, and we have a big snowstorm coming this weekend.
Really? Oh, okay.
So where I live, it's the seasons I mean, we have extremes. We have super hot and humid in the summer. Everything's lush and green. Fall, the colors here are incredible.
Yeah.
And then winter is long and cold. So every few months, even though I'm painting the same basic landscape, it changes all the time. So you don't just get comfortable, ever, because in 2 months it's going to be a whole new set of challenges. So yeah, that helps too. I like that though. I like living in the Midwest with these extreme seasons. It's kind
Yeah,
of
that
fun.
sounds wonderful because seeing fall is it's on my bucket list because we don't have fall here. So
Oh,
it's just last night I was talking to a friend who lives in the US, and she was just raving about fall and the colors, and she was saying you need to come here and see it and
you
go
do.
crazy with your painting.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's just this explosion of color. Really difficult to paint. I've done a few fall paintings lately, but yeah, those trying to get those colors in and not have it take over the whole thing is pretty difficult.
Sounds good. So, and tell me something. How do you navigate the art industry? Any tips for people who are trying to negotiate through, so many international exhibitions and just so many people teaching, and there's so many artists out there. How do navigate the art industry, and how do you get somewhere in it? It's a question a lot of people who watch these interviews ask this question. I get a few
Hmm.
DMs, always asking about this. That how do people who have really like done well in the art industry, how did they go through it? What was their journey like? And any advice they have for people who want to progress in their art, not in terms of technique and style, but in terms of the business side of it, maybe, or the marketing side of it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't speak to how anybody else has done it, obviously. But I think, um, to my own experience, initially I just kind of put a lot of stuff out there, wherever I could. And I don't know if that's a good way to do it or not, but I was, I actually wrote to an art magazine after my first trip to China and American Artist. And the magazines have the editorial staff, in the front of it. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm on this trip to China with several artists and I'd be willing to write an article and share some images. And they came back and said, yeah, that'd be great. So instead of just kind of sitting and waiting for someone to notice you and approach you, you might have to do that once in a while. It's uncomfortable, walking into galleries and all that kind of thing with your artwork and getting the rejection. But it's, something that we have to do. Like I said, you can't just sit back and hope that people are going to notice you. But at some point, I want to tread lightly here too, because I don't want to offend anybody. But I think it goes back to what I was saying before, and what really worked for me is how much time I got to take, to kind of hone my craft a little bit. It was probably 3 or 4 years before I even entered a local exhibition here, and some people, they take 2 workshops and they already have a YouTube channel, and a Etsy page, and they're putting their stuff out there. And I'm like, what do let yourself improve before people are taking, they've been painting for a year and they've taken my workshops, and all of a sudden, and then I see they're teaching already. I'm like, you're teaching your own workshops already, so yeah, you've got to be a little bit self-aware, I think, sometimes, and ask yourself, is this gallery going to really want my work or whatever, and I've gotten it from judging now as well. I mean, it was tough when I first started I had this kind of goal of, and that's another thing, set some goals for yourself, and some of them should be smaller goals that more, readily achieved, and then set some lofty goals. Don't set all lofty goals, because like you were saying, people get frustrated. And, if your
Yeah.
goal is to be a signature member and in this big international thing and you can't get in 4 years in a row, you're just going to give up. So have some smaller, more attainable goals. I want to get in, I want to get into this local show, or I want to, whatever, have a little set of gift cards or something I can print out. Like I said, some small things that you can achieve and keep you going, and then some lofty ones. But, I wanted to get into American Watercolor Society when I first started to paint. And I think the first 5 years, at least, probably rejection letter, and it does, for a little while, knocks you down, obviously, the disappointment. But I just kind of looked at my stuff, and then when the show came out, I saw the paintings, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not that good yet, and I worked harder, and tried to improve. So people get really offended, I think, that we all, have, because a lot goes into our art. You pour your heart and soul into it, and you're told by a lot of people around you how great it is and how great your art is, and then you submit to a show and it doesn't get in, and you're like, why am I not getting in? But it's a tough thing to do, though, these, especially the bigger international ones, because there's a lot of talented people out there.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, I just judge
And
it as
people
show.
around you are not going to say that your work's not good. I mean, they're going to say,
Right.
oh, wow, this is great. I mean,
Yeah,
how
exactly.
great is it?
Yeah.
Because,
Yep. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of times that's why you need to be a little bit self-aware too, because like you said, all the people, your friends and your family, they're all just going to tell you how great it
they're just
is,
going to say it's bad.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, with social media, it's all about likes and, it's just pressing a button. It's not like really somebody giving you constructive criticism, right? It's mostly, oh,
Yeah.
wow, this is great and it's a lovely, good work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's great. It's fun to wake up and see the painting you posted yesterday has a bunch of likes and comments. That's fun. And I usually go through and thank people, who have made a nice comment on there. I try to anyways. But yeah, that's not all what it's all about, obviously. And so yeah, it's another thing I should probably mention early on when I joined that Minnesota Watercolor Society. It kind of gave me a chance to make friends with other painters, and we got a little group together, probably like 8, maybe 10 at the most, of artists, and we didn't all paint the same. One of the ladies kind of focused on pet portraits. One of the ladies was very abstract with her work. Another one of the ladies did this kind of really cool, kind of a funky style that she was on like puzzle, boxes and
Okay.
things like that. I had another good friend who does this kind of acrylic style. It looks like a woodcut that he combines with watercolor. My style was kind of the more, so we had all these different people come in, and we try to get together once a month or every couple months and share what we were working on. And we were comfortable saying, I like that. And we were also comfortable saying, that's not working, because yeah, if you're just constantly showing your work to your friends and your family, you're not going to get the true feedback that you really need. And sometimes even in classes, I don't do a lot of critiquing in a workshop because again, I'm not expecting great results. I'll do a little bit of advice and stuff, but a lot of times even in workshops, you're not really getting that because there's so many people in there, you're not getting the real in-depth, kind of feedback. So that's a good thing to do. Maybe search out, it doesn't have to be a huge group, even if it's 4 or 5 of you that are kind of on the same
Yeah.
career arc and get together once in a while and have real honest discussions about your work. That's very helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's part of the American watercolor culture, to get together and work,
Mhm.
together and maybe just spend time with each other's work and, talk about it, discuss it. I have not seen that much, of that happening in India, maybe.
Really?
No, I mean, yeah, it might be between some friends, maybe. But I
Hmm.
think that's a brilliant idea of collecting people who are not really a similar style or who don't paint the same thing, because
Oh,
it's seeing your work through an artist's eyes, but not exactly someone who's doing the same work as you.
exactly.
That
Yeah.
sounds really interesting.
The lady who painted abstractly, I always loved her feedback because she would literally say, turn that painting upside down, and we'd look at it from a different angle, and then you're not seeing a subject, you're seeing a composition, and you start to realize, oh, I've got this is all broken up, that's not a good composition. So she had such a
Hmm.
great eye for, maybe adding a dark shape here, just because it helps the composition, not because it was in the scene. And yeah, her feedback was very
Oh, that's
valuable, even
wonderful.
though she painted nothing like me.
Yeah. Yeah. But painting abstract is not that simple. I mean, like
Oh,
people would like to think, because it's you really don't have anything to go with. You have to go by good composition and shapes, right?
Yes, it's
Oh,
very difficult. And now that I'm judging shows too, you see a lot of abstracts, that you can tell they're just, just colors and stuff, no, they're not paying attention, like I said, to composition, line, breathing space. It's just busy and, splashing colors all over and calling that's not what an abstract painting is, You still even all those formal elements of art are even more vital in an abstract painting because you're not painting something recognizable. So you have to, even have more heightened awareness of all the, line and composition and form and everything. So yeah,
yeah. And it has to communicate something to your viewer because otherwise it's not going to be successful. I mean,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But Andy, do you have any favorite series that you ever painted, or a certain city, maybe your a particular painting that's your favorite? Or it
Um,
could be just like a
well,
series, or a certain place you've painted or something.
yeah. I mean, I've been to China 8 times, and
Wow.
one of the smaller cities in China that I've been to has just been with friends, and a couple of those villages that I've been able to revisit, multiple times when I go back. That just because, again, kind of that whole aspect of challenging yourself and seeing something different. A lot of places, like I love England, and it does definitely have a different vibe to it than here, but it's still a very, familiar landscape, rolling hills and,
Yeah.
sheep and stuff. So that I love painting in England. Beautiful. I would live there if I could. But there's something about being, someplace so foreign, that half a world away that I look different, than everybody, and the buildings are different, the air is different, everything about it is it's really fun to paint in some of those smaller little villages in China, and just kind of get dropped in there and see what you can do. So yeah, this little village of Chikan, China, down by Kaiping and Guangzhou, always loved painting there. I haven't been there in a long time, obviously, but so that's high on my list of places that I've enjoyed to paint.
Okay.
I've got a couple little places down here in Minnesota, my typical drive that I take if the weather is kind of cool. Once you get down in southeastern Minnesota, down by the Mississippi River, you get more bluffs and really kind of beautiful old Amish farms and things like that. And so that's kind of one of my go-to spots also that I love to kind of paint,
Yeah.
as far as doing a series. And then, I mean, this little town that I live in, I painted, the church steeple from a lot of different,
Yeah.
viewpoints over the fields and on the street and looking at it through the woods. And so, and again, that goes back to paint what and I'm here all the time. So yeah, I've got a definite affinity for and sometimes I don't know, I never know how those paintings are going to be received, like I said, because it's familiar to me and I'm looking over and it's just kind of like, oh, that's cool. I can see, St. John's steeple over the bean fields and there's a little fog in the field. I want to paint that. That's so cool. And some other people might not, be affected by that at all, but I don't care. I was excited by
So
it.
plein
So
air painting is like one of the things that you really do a lot of, right? I think that's really helpful though. Painting
yeah.
outdoors, plein air painting.
Oh yeah. Yep. I love plein air painting. Yeah. Being out there in the moment that's a great way to challenge yourself, by the way. And again, we're going to have a snowstorm this weekend, it sounds like. So we're already coming up into that period where my plein air painting is going to be over with for a few months here. So I'll have to hunker down in the studio. But yeah, when the weather's nice, I love getting out there because that's another whole set of challenges.
It gets pretty cold out there, right? I mean, in the
Oh yeah.
winters.
Yeah, we get the state that I live in almost always has some of the coldest recorded temperatures every year. I don't know if it's because I live by the Great Lakes and there's always like this bulge of air that comes down from Canada into Minnesota. And oh yeah, it can get
They're
to, minus 30
it's
Fahrenheit.
shedding some
And
of their cold winter down south.
yeah, you just put on a bigger coat and go out and enjoy it. I mean, people here just because we live in it, they don't hunker in and not do anything. People are out ice fishing and cross country skiing, and even in the dead of winter, you'll see people running around the lakes,
Oh, really?
going there, just, yeah, you just still,
Yeah.
go about your business and live your life. So yeah, winter
Awesome.
sports are big.
So that brings me to the question, Andy. Love to know a little more about you as a person. Maybe what are your other interests, and maybe about your
Hmm.
family. Like, do you have any other hobbies apart from art? Like, art is something, of course, is a career.
Um, yeah, I mean, just again, because I grew up in the Midwest, the outdoors is a big part of
Mhm.
what we do here. And so my dad never hunted. I'm from a big family. I've got five brothers and two sisters. And, that we went fishing all the time as kids. Almost every summer, my dad would take us up trout fishing. I still love to do that. I'm not a big go out into a boat, in the ocean and fish. I love to walk along a riverbank and fish for trout. That's very peaceful. So I love doing that. Every once in a while, I'll still go up in the North Woods with my brother-in-law, the hunting cabin, and try my hand at deer hunting. I'm usually not very lucky at it, but it's fun just to get away and be in the woods. So I enjoy that. I read a lot. I like to read all kinds of things,
Mhm.
just histories I love reading about history. It's always fascinated me, nonfiction and just kind of seeing how we got to where we are today. And
Yeah.
yeah, but every once in a while I read just, for fun, a scary book or something. So yeah, I read a lot. I don't have a lot of time. I mean, I'm lucky, usually I'm so busy with things that if I have time, I'm going to paint, that's my, even
Yeah.
though it's my job, it's still, the best hobby in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll pull out my paints and paint whenever I can. But
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes I'll just go for long drives and just, try and find something new, a new discovery of something to paint, a new place. It's so strange how, I mean, we've been in this house for 25 years and
Really.
still to this day there I'll end up on a dirt road, within a couple of miles from here or something. I'm like, I've never been on this road before. I'm not, unless you make a point to really explore, you stay on the larger roads and get from place to place. So it's kind of fun to just wander and, and do that. I love movies too. I've always been,
Okay.
just ever since I was a kid. I think I saw it when Star Wars came out. I think I saw it in the theaters like 8 times. I was just obsessed with it. And
Yeah.
I always thought it'd be fun to be a movie critic. There was a TV show on when I was a kid, Siskel and Ebert, and they both wrote for Chicago newspapers, and they reviewed. They had a TV show on. I think it was like Thursday nights, and they would get together in a movie theater and they'd like review 4 or 5 movies, and they'd show clips and talk about it. And I was like, God, those guys have the best job. You get to go
I
watch
know,
movies,
man.
yeah, and talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So love just, watching movies too. I'm a big film buff. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think you
yeah.
can get a lot of clues from movies, because if you watch a lot of I don't know, it's visually very interesting because if you get sometimes you get a scene where you think there's something very cool, right? And you actually get a clue of that, right?
I wonder if I have I've got a little sketchbook somewhere. I'm not gonna be able to find it, I bet, but that I
Okay.
bring with me on the road sometimes if I'm just sitting, just if I have time to sketch. And I remember I was watching, I think it was Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh,
I
okay.
was in the hotel room and I was just kind of watching it at night, and it's such an old classic movie.
Yeah.
And I started realizing how many of these scenes were framed and filmed so beautifully. It was incredible. I started
Yeah.
pausing the movie and trying to sketch, a quick little sketch of things. And yeah, you're exactly right. Visually, how much do we just take it for granted that there's a story and they're acting, but the best movies and the best directors spend a lot of time, framing their shots, lighting their shots, the
Yeah.
composition of it all. So that's a big
I mean, they go
aspect
through
of
the
what I
entire
do.
process of storyboarding. I mean, that is exactly what, we do.
Yeah,
You cannot
exactly.
like really have an amazing movie without having it visually perfect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like, people like Spielberg. I mean, the reason his movies are so spectacular is the cinematography, right? It's just
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah, it's amazing. And
So yeah,
Hitchcock, I love Hitchcock
yeah,
movies, and
Hitchcock, for instance, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I took a class when I was in college, actually, a film appreciation type kind of a class, and they showed a lot of old black and white Hitchcock movies, and we kind of delved into those, how he frame shots. Yeah, so yeah, it all goes hand in hand. I think that's a big part of why I love movies so much is the
Yeah,
visual aspect of it.
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
Great. And it was lovely talking to you. I mean, it was really, really nice. And I think time just flew by. I don't want to take more of your
I
time.
don't
I'm sure
even.
you're
Oh
busy.
wow.
Yeah. But it's always very nice talking about these things because you kind of, relate to it, right? I mean, in every level. So, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Andy. It was really, really nice. And
thanks
thanks
for
for
having
taking
me,
out time.
Shikha. Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. I hope it was fun and informative for people viewing
Definitely.
it. So
Definitely.
yeah. All right. Thanks,
All
Shikha.
right. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.